So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Warmer. So let's start the series. Many say that children are innocent in their parents' mistakes. In Naruto's case, he wasn't only cursed with unimaginable demonic power, given to him by the beast, sealed inside of him, but also curse of his vampiric blood, inherited by him, through his terrifying grandfather, Vlad von Karstein. Many years ago, Vlad tried to create the species of vampires, who will lack the weaknesses of the normal ones, but will keep all their strength. He tried countless rituals and finally used them on a woman and himself. Old vampire lord selected a natural breeding for this cause, desiring a true heir for von Karstein line. However, the child born from that union was absolutely normal. In fury, von Karstein casted the spell that was supposed to rip child into shreds, but winds of warp were always unpredictable. Instead of dying, child appeared in another place. There he was taken into the orphanage, and then, much later, he will become a great warrior of nearly unmatched skill. Minato, Namikaze Minato, that will be his name, unknowingly. His true name was Minato von Karstein. Even if Minato didn't inherit powers of Vlad, experiment didn't fail. Next generation was successful where the previous failed. Naruto, Minato's son, unknowingly to his parents, was born with powers of von Karstein's line, just as Vlad wanted. Human and vampire, both yet neither, he had all the strength and absolutely no weaknesses. Except one flaw, his thirst. Thirst for blood didn't disappear, and with sealing of giant demon in his gut, his father just increased it. Vlad started to sense his progeny from time to time, but he failed to understand where he was and from where the call came, so the first 12 years of his life Naruto suffered in Konoha. However, later, he will remember them as the brightest days of his life, because, no matter how high the wall between him and society was, he was still surrounded by humans and not night predators. Everything, however, will change, as Vlad will take him. During 12 years in Konoha, Naruto endured the lone fate, forced upon him by his father, and as he will later say, it prepared him to even loner existence of Vampire Lord. During his early years, he managed to make a first step to recognition that he so desired and deserved. He saved countries, fought enemy ninja, gained friends, but as some people say, life is like zebra, and Naruto's life reached its black line in hell. It was really long. First call was defection of his so-called rival and best friend, Sasuke, group of genins under Shikamaru's command sent to return him back. He was among them. He was the only one who managed to reach Sasuke. After the long exhausting battle he prevailed due to his completely awakened blood. However, when Kakashi arrived, there was only Sasuke, who was unconsciously floating on the water. Naruto, on the other hand, summoned by Vlad, through the teleportation circle, became his apprentice. Before he was properly trained and introduced to other relatives, Vlad's sons in darkness were classical vampires, arrogant, bloodthirsty, two ambitious rulers of the necromancy. They all wanted to create the Emperor of the Dead, well, all, except Conrad. He just wanted to butcher everything in sight. Naruto became powerful warrior and mastered arts of necromancy. However, unlike his relatives, he just disappeared on the territory of Empire. Unknown to anyone, he lived through all vampire wars, fighting as mercenary against undead. During the reign of Karl Franz, he became the leader of mercenary band. His Black Knights, created by black sorcery and necromancy, quickly became a feared heavy cavalry unit. He was there when the young emperor called to arms and marched to the north. Karl was very enthusiastic man when it came to battle, and he never let his enemies do as they please if he had a say in it. Conquest after the conquest, battle after the battle, victory after victory, Karl Franz bested every foe who had thrown himself against him or empire. Even if he was always a supporter of peace, there were still plenty of those who wanted to destroy empire. Countless conflicts gave Naruto fame and money. Even if he was considered a mercenary, he had answered Empire's call much more eagerly. Even if he was promised less money, he was also known for the fact that his small regiment managed to overcome enemies much greater in numbers than his own. Some whispered about sorcery, some, that he wasn't even human, but both sides agreed that it was good to have him and his men on the Empire side. During his travels he had also acquired a strange ally, female Drukei. It was during the times when he traveled the world, somewhere after the Third Vampire War. He went north and naturally came upon something really interesting group of chaos dwarves, who guarded some kind of cage, hidden by cloth. Of course, slaying followers of chaos was always a big plus to your karma and a good deed in eyes of all good deities, so Naruto just slayed the dwarves and ripped the cloth from the cage. To his surprise, his eyes met the equally surprised and scared eyes of beautiful elven maiden, a Drukei woman. She asked him if she wanted a company in his travel, and for the first time in his life, Naruto didn't know what to say to this simple question. Nevertheless, he desired company and said, yes. Thus she followed him, loyally and wordlessly, something that he wasn't expected to see from Drukei. Maybe it was all the play, maybe, but until she will not betray him, he will not cut her head off. But hours turned into days, days into months and months into years, and she still was his most loyal supporter. He never asked how she got herself into the situation that led to their meeting, but she once told that her family deemed her weak and the head of her family ordered her death. That's how he received his own sorceress and one of his most trusted allies. However, like all von Karsteins, he started to thirst for more. His current style of life gave him everything he needed: money, women, food. However, in his dreams he saw himself as ruler of his own mark, as Elector Count in Empire, with one of the two vacant runfangs in his hands. Naruto had enough examples of his wayward kin to understand that illegal and forceful ways to position of power will not give him desired throne. During his travels, through completing several tasks for the emperor's family, or various electors and their families, he managed to get himself enough of a good credit to be recognized as non-hostile vampire, very much like Lady Diudon, and receive a right to live among humans. Of course, Templars didn't like this. However, Naruto managed to deal with such problem. Over several centuries of his existence, he managed to forge some alliances that helped him during the tough times. His connections with some influential and powerful lectors gave him so needed freedom for some services. After all, when you kill a vampire, for example, his or her nest nearly always declare the vengeance on those who did it, and usually it ended in massive raid on territories of human kingdoms. However, if vampire slayed vampire, it was just the fight for the territory for others, nothing big. So Naruto slayed the other vampires, thus keeping his territory clean and getting the witch hunters from his tail. So, right now, marching to the throne room of the emperor himself, he was questioning himself what caused the sudden call of his services. Dark lands, plain of Zarduk. Mordain the head taker was in a way, a dwarf of his word. Why in a way? He was a chaos dwarf, but even in their society, loyalty to your word still was valued. Moreover, a man of his position must show that he always keeps his promises, especially if he promised to make someone's life miserable. His benefactor, Gakrith, one of the sorcerers of chaos, who served as priest of Hazhut, struck a deal with Malekith, which king of Nagaroth. For slaves they will trade their heavy weapons, which fallen prince wanted to use against the elves of Ulthuan. It was no secret how much the elves despised the dwarves and everything connected to them. However, Malekith's hatred to high elves overpowered his hatred to bearded midgets. Thus, he agreed to trade slaves for weapons of the chaos dwarves. Deal was highly profitable for both sides. However, there was one part of their deal, written in fine print. Malekith ordered his grandniece to be given to the dwarves, to be tortured for disobedience and show of weakness. Girls secretly helped slaves, tolerating something like this in his family. It was beyond Malekith's understanding of the world and family values. However, the brat disappeared from the caravan, with all her guards were mercilessly slaughtered. Dwarf showed his tusks and growled, now it was his turn to deal with the girl and her mysterious protector. After all, if you want the job done, do it yourself. After brief praying to Hazhut, Chaos Dwarf went to gather provision and men. His path led into the last place, where the damned Druchii was seen, Empire. Altdorf, Emperor's Chambers. Naruto knelt in front of the man, to whom he swore his allegiance many years ago. Naruto, old friend, please, rise, said Karl Franz, current emperor of the human empire. It is unbecoming for a man, who saved my life several times, to kneel in front of his friend, said Karl, stretching his arm and raising his friend to his feet. It's normal for a vassal to show respect for his emperor, countered Naruto. I'm loyal to Empire and you, my emperor. Karl Franz turned to the window and started to walk to the window. Were you successful? Asked he. Yes, answered Naruto, I did as we agreed. Many years ago, Emperor Ludwig decided that fighting undead shall be prerogative of the undead. As Elector Count of Reichland he ordered me to create an order of elite undead warriors. I did as he ordered, 1,000 warriors, Black Knights, whose martial skills are ensured by countless soul imprints gathered by me. You took the souls of men, instantly turned to him Karl Franz. Souls? Sigmar forbid, no. I collected soul imprints, taking copies of their skills, leaving their souls intact. Of course, I didn't hunt them down, they hunted me. Therefore, I took powers from greatest knights of Bretonia and professional vampire hunters. Emperor scratched his chin. You will lead them into battle. By the way, how do they look? Animated armor, basically, it's my variant of magical golems. Maybe we will be able to use it in new war, said the Emperor. Recently Empire suffered from the increase of greenskins raids. Grimgar Ironhide leads his black orcs to our borders. Even now he assaults our keeps. Take your order. Of Black Chalice. Of Black Chalice, and get them to the borders. Countless knight orders of Empire had already arrived to the Black Fire Pass. You will go there and you will assist Empire's army. Your goal is to prevent the orcish Waagh from passing to the moot. Naruto also walked to the window and looked down, at the noisy streets of the Altdorf. Will we receive any reinforcements? Moot will send their representatives and rangers. We can form recon divisions from them. That we can do, said Naruto, when Reichsmarschall will arrive there alongside Reichsguard. Situation on South was dire, since other conflicts thinned all reserves of manpower that Empire had. Karl Franz was forced to spare small forces from each garrison of other keeps and Empire's cities to protect the moot, that provided provision for nearly entire Empire. Kurt will get there as fast as possible, assured him the Emperor. Naruto shrugged. He didn't like the Reichsmarschall and the feeling was mutual, only the fact that they both loyally served the Emperor stopped them from fighting each other. However, he was in good terms with Mad Count and this fact infuriated Reichsmarschall even more than the fact that in his presence was a vampire, who he couldn't behead. So, I will go first and Kurt will go just behind me, finished Naruto. Anything else? No, try to not let them enter the territory of the moot. Several days later, Naruto beheaded another orc and commanded his forces to take the defensive formation behind him. When he arrived to the Bulk Fire Pass, Black Orcs had already managed to destroy the shattered forces of Empire. Moreover, they somehow managed to force several bands of beastmen to join their cause. Now, shattered army of the Empire struggled against two forces that thirsted their destruction. Originally, their plan wasn't that bad, but beastmen managed to crush their plans. Naruto was ripped out of his thoughts by loud roar. His sword, Blood Drinker, flashed under the faint light of the moon, beheading the charging beastman. Suddenly Naruto heard the sound of horn and he sighed in relief. Hellborg! Never thought that I will glad to see you, but, well. I'm really glad to see you, screamed Naruto kicking another beastman into his chest and with satisfaction listening to cracking of his bones. Later, Pale Boy, screamed Kurt, where the hell is the army? We are the army, Mustache, answered Naruto, continuing to cut down the beastmen. Greenskins managed to persuade the beastmen to take their side. Those bastards hunted down the Empire's forces. I saw countless altars with helms of our commanders. Maybe there are still those who fight against them. But all I can be sure of, that there are your forces and mine. Kurt sighed. Beastmen retreated under the combined assault of the Black Chalice and Reichsguard. So? Asked Helborg, you are here longer than us, how did it happen? I need details. Naruto looked around, still unsure that beastmen left them alone. I arrived when everything was already lost. Orcs invaded the moot. Beastmen carried the helms and skulls of our men on their banners. I started to hunt them down, also searching for survivors, but as you can see, for no avail. Moreover, I still have yet to see any black orc. Not even one? Asked Helborg. Not even one, nodded Naruto. It looks like whatever force made it through the Black Fire Pass, black orcs stayed behind, and it is rather unusual. I would rather say, troubling, noted Kurt, checking how easy his runefang gets out of its sheath. They heard sounds of battle at the same moment and touched the horses with spurs at the same time. After several minutes of non-stop riding, they saw a surrounded squad of Imperial longswords. First survivors that both parties met. Without a doubt, these people passed through a lot, and they also were invaluable sources of information. After they finished patching up the survivors, Naruto and Helborg had finally found out what happened. Somehow, Greenskins and Beastmen knew exactly where the Empire forces were gathering. Someone sold them up. Commander of the Great Swords had also informed them that there were other surviving warriors nearby. Several more squads of the Great Swords, Pistoliers, and survivors of the Knightly Orders. Helborg and Naruto managed to gather the survivors and kick the beastmen out of the occupied territories. However, the Greenskins occupied keeps near the Black Fire Pass and still managed to get the reinforcements through mountains with no effort. Naruto and Helborg were greatly troubled by the fact that black orcs were still absent in the orcish horde. Fortunately, Moot continued to support them, so death from starvation wasn't something that awaited them in near future. They had sent the runners to the city of Altdorf, in hopes that the Emperor will send them either reinforcements or war machines to deal with the walls of the keeps. 5 days later, Naruto had finally lost his patience. He ordered Empire's forces to wait in the forest, and when his knights gained attention of the Greenskins, he climbed the wall and, after slaying all guards, opened the gates of the keep. Empire's army smashed the orcs and invaded the keep that was taken from them nearly a month ago. Naruto had spent another month there, alongside Reichsmarschall, rebuilding the keep that protected the Black Fire Pass and cleaning the territory from the last orc warbands. Black orcs didn't pass the mountains, and that sprung the Reichsmarschall's paranoia. By his orders, Naruto returned to the Altdorf and went to the meeting with the Emperor. Empire of Man, Great City of Altdorf, Royal Chambers. When Naruto heard the loud screams from the cabinet of his Emperor, he heard loud female voice. Realization struck him like lightning, and not caring about his image, hid in the darkest corner, behind the massive knight armor. When he heard how rustling of long female dress disappeared somewhere away, he turned into a thick black mist and got inside Karl Franz's cabinet. He had found his Emperor pouring large glass with some strong alcohol of dwarven brewing. "Why the hell didn't you tell me that she is here?" asked he. "You would have left me to suffer alone, if I told." Maria Holzwig Schleierstein, fourth child of the Karl Franz, only daughter of his, always unruly, rebellious and hyperactive. Naruto acted as her swordsmanship teacher. When she was younger, however, when young princess hit puberty, started problems. At first she wanted her Naruto as her official lover. When she received a polite decline, Maria asked her father to speak with Naruto. After two men spoke, Maria was sent away from the Altdorf, to female monastery. She was followed by countless female teachers, whose prerogative was to make a proper lady out of her. Unfortunately, Maria had other plans. She denied their attempts and focused on military training and science. Moreover, to worry of her teachers, young princess spent too much time in company of females, rather than males. Moreover, princess started to gather around herself a group of loyal supporters. Slowly, but surely, group of different specialists turned into an army. Emperor bothered the fact that his unruly daughter gathered so many forces and denied him any kind of explanation. "Yes, I know I'm a jerk," said the emperor, catching Naruto's annoyed gaze. "Unfortunately, it comes with a job. Nevertheless, my dear daughter isn't the cause of you being here. Your annoying relatives had once again decided that powers in the Sylvania are shared unfairly, and normally I wouldn't have cared, but my spies report that there is a vampire, who claims to be of famous von Karstein bloodline. There are countless vampires of that bloodline, moreover there are many imposters. The one we are interested in is calling himself Manfred, and he looks exactly like the bald bastard is portrayed in historical chronicles. And you need me to go there and check, if it is truly uncle." Emperor sighed. True surname of his trusted champion was one of the guarded secrets. Even his name was changed to Nathaniel, and only Emperor knew that his true name was Naruto von Karstein. Instead of answering, Emperor silently nodded. Sylvania, week later. Naruto, atop his nightmare, looked at the battlefield from above. His cavalry followed his orders and destroyed another horde of skeletons. By the time he had arrived to Sylvania, Manfred, and it really was his uncle in darkness, already controlled all East Sylvania. Other notable vampire counts weren't so eager to follow him and waited till his battle against High Necromancer Selig von Kruger. Manfred, with his charisma, slowly was winning sympathies of his fellow brothers and sisters of the night, and his talents on the battlefield quickly raised his popularity. Son in darkness of Vlad von Karstein was gathering armies of undead, and forces of Kruger didn't manage to hold his unrelenting rage. Right now, Manfred was dealing with forces of Empire, stationed near Helfen, leaving East Sylvania without his attention, and this fact was used by Naruto to the fullest. His forces were mobile, even if much smaller than Manfred's. He still managed to destroy many infrastructures that provided his relative with riches that he wanted to use in future war with Empire. How did he find out this valuable information? Several bold vampire lords dared to challenge him. Their heads soon were attached to his nightmare's saddle. Now, wherever he went, clip-clop sound of attached skulls followed him. Also captured vampire lords told him that Manfred wanted some artifact, which might will let him rise countless undead soldiers without enormous amount of warp stone. What was really interesting, the artifact was actually a holy object, powerful enough to clean up the entire territory of Sylvania from curse of undeath and curing the earth. Such power was exactly what Naruto needed to deal with Manfred, so he followed Manfred's agents to the kingdom of Bretonia, in hopes to get the power of the artifact for himself. Bretonia, Chapel of the Lady of the Lake. Onward, men! Onward! Protect the inner chambers of the chapel. Guiche de Boot was one of the many Grail Knights, who protected the Chapel of the Lady. This chapel held the piece of the map, written by the hand of the Gillis Le Breton himself. It will show the path to the domain of the Lady, filled with artifacts of godly power. However, such immense power can be used in both ways. Those who wished to use it for evil finally came to their lands. Guiche traveled for a lot of time, and he instantly recognized their opponent. When he recognized them, blood ran cold in his veins. Vampires, scourge of Sylvania. Warriors, clad in bloody red armor, ornamented with different images of bats and leather wings. Vampire knights, just the right guys to get his day any better. If he will not die in battle, he will certainly be turned into a snuck, or risen as undead. Suddenly he noticed that among the red-armored figures, there were others, clad in armor of Britannia's Grail Knights, betrayers. They sold their friends, comrades and oaths for some sort of fake immortality. He pitied them, but it didn't mean that he will stay his hand. Knight blocked another strike with his sword and hit smiling Bastard's face, beating out his fangs, with sharp side of his shield. However, he was just one man, other fellow brothers in arms had already fallen in battle. Soon, swords of his enemies found weak points in his armor and pierced it. From immense pain, last night fell on the floor. Quick! Secure the map. Master Manfred will have our heads if we will stall the progress of the mission even for a second. It was strange for vampires to not even drink the blood of the fallen. Goeche, however, was in too much pain to care about it. His head hit the stone floor and darkness finally claimed him. Naruto finally reached the chapel. He had lost his steed when he passed the border. All this time he had followed the tracks of the vampires from Sylvania, but their squad always divided, so Naruto followed the one who he sensed first, Kulfos von Karstein. He didn't belong to a direct bloodline of von Karstein family, like Naruto and his uncles did. No, Kulfos was one of the many distant relatives, cannon fodder and errand boys, whom Manfred so liked to use. However, Manfred always gave his trustworthy champion some perks and Kulfos didn't fail his master, not even once. With his demonic steed, he and his men were part of Manfred's logistics divisions, fast as wind the Black Riders were, but Naruto's nightmare was relentless. Due to him, young Lord of the Night managed to follow his targets. However, Kulfos ordered his men to ambush Naruto and in quick battle one of the vampires managed to kill the steed. Forced to walk, Naruto reached the chapel too late. It was already sieged and vampires took what they wanted. However, one of the knights still breathed. It was promising. He needed information and he will receive it. Naruto get the potions out of his bag. Gueche de But was a true exemplar of the Grail Knight. Because I saved his life, he swore an oath of servitude to Naruto. Creature of the night. Moreover, he didn't feel any kind of deceit from the knight and vampire learnt to trust his sixth sense. From the night, Naruto had found out about the holy place, where resided the Lady of the Lake. If vampires were heading there, then both of them will just wait for undead there. I highly doubt that we will get there in time, said the knight, with all due respect, but you had lost too much time, saving my life. Ah, Goeche, always a true knight, mission and oath before his personal well-being. Fortunately, you have such awesome suzerain as me. You would have died there, was it not for my help, so, if you have a plan, please share it with me, said Naruto. There is a witch. Started Goeche. Witch? Raised his brow Naruto, as in real one, or one of those charlatans, who use crystal orbs to fool a common folk to get their money. Real one, sire, she lives in the forest nearby and she has the blessing of the lady. People say that she has a way to get into her realm, a backdoor, in a way. Then why didn't vampires consider attacking her? Asked Naruto. She is a common legend around here, isn't she? They would have already heard about her. She is powerful. Roy Arch once sent his best knights to get her out of our lands and none of them have returned. Then Lady came and claimed that the witch is under her protection. Appearance of the goddess isn't something that we can ignore. Okay, let's see that witch. After all, without horses we will manage to get them only near the border, said Naruto. Both warriors slightly changed their way, leaving the road behind, to get further into the heart of the forest. The deeper they came, the stranger was everything around them. Naruto was even more aware of this fact than Sir Knight. He felt how ancient magic filled the air, magic quite different from the one he used to unleash on his enemies. He felt it. It was like a shadow, strangely, for vampire, who was master of shadow and darkness and governed over blood. These shadows seemed somehow alien. They didn't notice her, until she was so close that Naruto could stretch his hand and touch her. Naruto expected anything from the witch, but he had never expected her to be this sexy. Moreover, her choice of wardrobe was very revealing. Naruto looked into her golden eyes and couldn't move his gaze, which also seemed to be somewhat hypnotized by his gaze. Only calm coughing of the night made them turn in his direction. Sir Goeche, looks like finally keep your promise you did, which turned her back to them and moving her hips walked away. Two men followed her, Sometime later all three reached the witch's hut. When they entered, first thing that Naruto noticed was the large mirror. It had some strange aura, like it was much more than a mirror, like it was a door, which led somewhere. "Do you like it?" asked the witch. "Eye-catching, isn't it? At least for those who knows where they must look." Naruto took his place behind the table. "My lord, this is Morrigan, Witch of the Wild, Lady Morrigan this is. Grandson of Vahanesh, I know, ravens told me, winds of magic roared when you were born, creature of neither night nor day, vampire and human, both yet neither," which made a pause. "Truly, rewarded will be my long wait." "Rewarded? Wait? And how the hell do you know the true name of my grandfather?" asked Naruto, trying to find the hilt of his sword. "Told you I did, ravens, birds of war told this to me, I'm Witch of the Wild, in my power to order them," answered Morrigan. "But enough of these silly questions, came here you with certain intention, to Lady's temple I can lead you by shortest of ways, dangerous this path is, but time will it give you that you so sorely lack. In return, of simple task do I ask." "And what is that, simple task?" asked Naruto. "Very simple it is," answered Morrigan, "with you I will go, saw I that my help in future will you require." Naruto scratched his chin. He knew that witches were rather strange and always had a hidden agenda, but he will be in profit, if he will get another witch to his side. Right now, his Druchi friend is commanding his forces in Sylvania, attacking Manfred's posts. However, his uncle had too many necromancers and other vampire lords under his command. His army was simply too big for his small knight order. Of course, his knights were perfect and he had commander for them, who actually knew what needed to be done, but there were so many undead that they will simply overwhelm Naruto's forces with numbers. Moreover, he still had a lot of money, thus he can afford himself many additional forces, a form of dogs of war. "So, how do you plan bring us there? Once again, for dump half vampires. You want us to pass through this mirror?" asked Naruto pointing at the mirror near the wall. "Eluvian is a magical portal to another realm," said Morrigan. "We will manage to reach the lady through it. You do understand that realm of the gods, where they live is closed to us. Except for some open back doors, like the one pinpointed on that map, guarded by ladies' knights. Moreover, realms of chaos are much closer to this one than before. Moorslide will rise soon, everything will change into, hell knows into what, actually. Tinkering with space-time continuum isn't something that we can afford right now, it's suicide. Yet it is only way to get to the needed place before the vampires," said Goichi. "Or with them," countered Naruto. "Don't underestimate these bastards. I fought against the vampire lords, when several knight orders banded together to invade Sylvania," answered Knight. "I know how problematic they can be, however. I got something from that war." He clapped on the hilt of his sword, "very good for fighting against vampires. Okay. It may look like we are in the shitty situation. However, we have no other choice, but to use this Eluvian. We need to get to the realm of the lady. So, start I can?" asked Morrigan raising her hand. "Yes," answered Naruto. Green energy covered Morrigan's hands, mirror's surface shifted as if it was water under wind. Morrigan stopped her actions and nodded to Naruto and Goichi, giving example. She was the first to enter the Eluvian, both warriors followed her moment later. Empire of Man. Maria Holzwig Schleierstein was nervous. She was the fourth child of the emperor and the only daughter. She received excellent education, learned arts of swordsmanship, war strategy and tactics under best teachers, had characteristics of a leader and skills of inventor. She was a poster example of what a true noble must be. However, Maria was ambitious. She wanted to rule her own country or at least lead an army. She knew that with her being a girl, she would receive nothing but distrust in the patriarchal human kingdoms and empires. So, Maria started to think about gathering an army of her own followers, females, At first, the idea visited her, when she heard about the squad of dogs of war, made completely of female warriors. They came from another continent, group of warrior women, who worshipped unknown gods and called themselves Amazons. Maria decided to contact them first. Squad of 10 Amazons will become the first warriors of her future army. However, before they will follow her she must recruit them. And trust to be told, it was rather problematic. Their leader Arisia quickly understood all profits of her young princess proposition. However, she also needed guarantees. If Maria will agree to pass through a ritual with her, she will receive the aid of her warriors. If not, there will be no deal. Princess knew how risky it can be to take part in the ritual she knew nothing about. Nevertheless, she had no choice. She needed at least some competent warriors to start the building of her army and maybe later, empire. She passed through ritual. As she had found out later, she and Arisia passed through the ritual of bond. In other words, she suddenly married. Old World will not found about that particular fact until the cataclysm, but that history will be told later. While unknowingly newlywed princess thought about her plans for the future, Arisia, alongside her priestess, drank a rare wine in her personal tent. That girl will lead us to our doom, said Shannare, the priestess, who executed the ritual. I do not understand why you decided to use the bonding ritual. She cannot even understand the importance of this ritual. She will reach unimaginable heights. Shannare, I need to bind her to myself, until someone else could have done the same, countered Arisia. As you wish, however, she may rise, but the chance of her fall is also impressive. Realm between the plane of mortals, demons and gods. Naruto always hated how chaos, or demons twisted the realms around them. However, wherever they were, something fucked the laws created by nature roughly. Sky was green, unnaturally, dark emerald, green. They stood on the rocky path, somewhere in the mountains, or at least it looked like this, because there was no horizon. Instead, it looked like they stood on the big chalk of rock, which floated in nothingness. Naruto didn't like the cards he was forced to play with. Let's go, said Morrigan, not much time we have, until react this realm will. React? Asked Naruto, what do you mean? Demons of both warp, and those, who realm this inhabit, may sense us here, answered Morrigan, hunt us down, they will try. Try? Asked Naruto, or will? Instead of an answer Morrigan turned to the road that led farther away. Suddenly several red portals appeared above the earth. When the first demon stepped out of the portal, Naruto instantly recognized him. Corn Daemonkin, bloodletters. Well, at least it was just foot soldiers, said Goichi. At the same time, several more portals opened. Bloodletters swarmed the field before them, their pikes, swords and fists raised into the air. Some of them raided the demonic beasts both of flesh and of metal. Naruto unsheathed his sword. Goichi prepared his. Morrigan prepared her magic staff. Vampires? Asked Goichi. Yeah, we all make mistakes, said Naruto, taking a defensive stance. Let us hope that this one will not cost us our life. Hopefully, said Goichi, also raising his sword. Less talking, more slaying, screamed Morrigan, sending fireball into a crowd of demons. However, blessing of corn, natural resistance to magic and heat made this attack nearly useless. Slaying? Asked Naruto, cleaving bloodletter in half, more like making them angrier. Goichi pierced another with his sword and kicked the other one, sending him back into the hordes of his brethren. Situation is rather shitty, commented he, cleaving another demon. Follow me. I wanted to keep it for vampires, but it looks like we have no other choice, said Naruto, getting some spherical objects from the pouch on his belt, bought through third hands from the dwarves. Vampire Lord threw the bombs into the horde of demons, and explosions, blooming like giant flowers made of fire, killed countless demons, creating holes in the crowd. They were large enough for 3 travelers to pass. There, screamed Morrigan and Goichi with Naruto raised their heads, looking in direction where Morrigan pointed, somewhere far away, behind hordes of demon, they saw a glimpse of green light. There it is, our way out of here. To where? Asked her Naruto. Hell if I know, answered Morrigan, somewhere away from here. Explosions cleared them path to a small plateau, where green portal awaited them. Protect me, screamed Morrigan, raising her hands, I will try to open the rift. You heard the lady, said Naruto, we need to hold them. First demon, who stepped on the plateau, lost its head. Courtesy of Naruto, Goichi broke another's neck with his shield and pierced second demon with his sword. Looks like you had softened up, my lord, I'm one demon ahead you. We are counting. No, just joking, smiled the knight. Demonic ichor covered him head to toe and he looked like a maniac, after really messy act of violence. Good, because it is still my 223, against your 59, countered Naruto. Naruto. Goichi. Now, screamed Morrigan, and with move of her hand they disappeared in blinding green light. Sylvania, Castle Drakenhof. Manfred von Karstein was known for his constant grim mood. In other words, every day turned into a walk-over explosive field. However, this particular day just hit a lowest mark. With loud roar, Vampire Lord destroyed his own cabinet. Kemmler's plan failed. He just received the report. His insane nephew in darkness managed to survive. Heinrich stood near the door like silent statue to himself. He knew better than argue with Manfred when he is like this. Suddenly, Vampire stopped. Uneasy silence fell before the necromancer and the lord. Kemmler knew what will happen next. Imminent explosion. You, said Manfred, you said that you have everything under your control, that my diabolic nephew will be dealt with, that demons of warp will tear him apart, while he will be on the fucking ways. However, what happened, heh? He passed them, saved the day, and received a blessing from a goddess alongside the magical artifact that we wished to acquire. Moreover, his bitch stopped the destruction of our camps and by the looks of it, went to join Naruto. Manfred sighed and sat back, into his chair. Isn't her absence a good thing for us, my lord? Asked Kemmler. Good. Kemmler, are you an idiot or perhaps deranged? Asked Vampire. She will unite with Naruto. He will open his very deep vaults to hire mercenaries, who will receive his gold and return Sylvania to him with their weapons. Also, he is in good relationship with that son of a bitch, Karl Franz. Empire might help him against us. Manfred placed his hands on his temples and massaged them. We are deep in shit, Kemmler, too deep, actually, silently said Manfred. We are surrounded by enemies. My gambit to increase my power had failed. How is it possible? How did it happen? Kulfos was there, my lord, said Heinrich. He managed to get away from the massacre. When Kulfos went to his mission, he was filled with power, self-confidence was in his every move, and the way he carried himself. He wanted to prove himself, he wanted to have more. There was so much ambition, so much rage in him. There was nothing left. Before him stood literally a walking corpse. He was battered and beaten, his right hand missing, as if somebody cut it and burnt the wound. How did it happen? Asked Manfred, and Kulfos started his tale. They should have been prepared. They tried to sack the treasury of the goddess. They should have been prepared to face her greatest champion. Green Knight himself stood on their way. Green burning blade left glowing arcs in the air, adding another vampire to the numbers of the fallen with each strike. Kulfos remembered how he slowly pulled his sword out, and lost his hand for it. Green Knight was everywhere, alone, he was like an entire army. Green hurricane of steel and ethereal power cleansed the sacred realm of undead filth. That was the scene that Naruto and his companions saw, when he had stepped on the sacred ground of Lady's hidden chapel. Looks like we weren't so needed as you presumed, said High Britannian Knight, who stood behind the youngest of the von Karstein, sired by the Vlad himself. Kulfos used the time given to him, by the sudden appearance of the young prince, to hide in the shadows. Green Knight turned to them, his glowing, ethereal gaze looked over each one of the new arrivals, and stopped on Naruto. He raised his green blade and emerald flame engulfed it. Vampire Count didn't need more invitations. He raised Bloodthirster and blocked the first monstrous strike. Never before and never after had Guiche seen such fight. He heard that Green Knight was virtually unstoppable. There were tales about his battles, when he was literally beheaded, but still continued to fight, only to return for his head later, after he killed all enemies, who endangered the lady and Britannia. Someone like him shall be impossible to face, but Naruto firmly held his ground. Glowing green and red met each other in the waltz of death. Vampires were always blabbering about the infamous dance macabre. Maybe it happened right now, before the eyes of two mortals and frightened vampire. As it was told, Green Knight was skilled warrior, empowered by the powers of the lady. He disappeared from sight, attacked from different direction and was immune to the normal weapons. However, his opponent wasn't so easy to deal with. When Knight turned into a mist, so did Naruto. When he attacked, teleporting from different directions, Naruto turned into a swarm of bats. When Green Knight tried to overpower Naruto with his swordsmanship skills, Naruto blocked his tricks and fints with his own. However, there still was magic and shape-shifting. If former was out of question because of the fierce duel, then the latter caused lot of problems for Green Knight, especially the form of the anthropomorphic fox. Nine Tails seemed to live their own life, attacking Green Knight by all possible ways and from all possible directions. At those moments, it looked like he was fighting against 10 warriors at once. When Naruto turned into his human form once again, red and green blades met again, but this time, the blow was so strong that even inhuman strength of both duelists wasn't enough to hold them in hands. Spinning in the air, both blades stabbed the earth behind their backs. Naruto reacted first, his fist in black, clawed gauntlet connected with Knight's helmet causing loud clanging sound. However, Knight quickly regrouped and next punch, thrown by Naruto, was caught by his block. Fight between titans quickly started to remind a casual bar fight between two drunken men. Enough of this. Mighty voice, which certainly belonged to female, stopped both warriors on their places. It is told that perfection is unreachable ideal. Well, if somebody asked Naruto, at that moment he saw it. Perfection, it was in every step of this woman, in her every movement, in her every word, intonation of her voice. Everything in her was godly. I know why you came here, Black Knight, said she, turning to Naruto. She raised her hand and a golden goblet appeared in it with glowing water filling it to the brim. Drink, if you are worthy, it will not hurt you. If you are not, you will turn into dust. He took the goblet from her hands and said, for you, my lady, emptying it in one gulp. Everyone expected him to burn in holy fire. However, nothing had happened. He just moved his hand to his lips and spitted a small glowing gem on his armored gauntlet. Tear of the lady, muttered Guiche. Yes, nodded woman, my crystallized tear. That is what Manfred wanted. That is also what you will need to heal the lands of Sylvania. Go to Jade Mother, she will help. Manfred looked at Kulfos, his expression stoic and unreadable. Perhaps, that's how he always looked during the times when his sire, Vlad von Karstein, was alive. Is it all? Asked he. Yes. Nobody, but you knows. Yes. Good. With speed of lightning Manfred struck with his sword, horizontally, severing Kulfo's head from his body. You said that you know another way, Heinrich, said Manfred, turning to Necromancer. Hopefully, you will not fail as did this fool. But of course, my liege, let me show you a decision to all our problems. Fort Obersteier, Western Sylvania. Unfortunately, to gather all forces and call into old favors Naruto needed time, and time also played in favor of his uncle in darkness. High priests of Sigmar and Templars also tried to sabotage his efforts. They were all right with destruction of the vampire nests in Sylvania, but they were absolutely against idea of him leading the army. However, Karl Franz will manage something, that Naruto was sure. He was slippery like a snake. when situation called for it, mercenary groups and armies summoned by Emperor will gather in next month. Moreover, Naruto needed to buy provision, powder, even hire horse for soldiers. Nothing shall pass his gaze unnoticed. While he was consumed by the pre-war preparations, Morrigan and Dainia, the Drukei sorceress, tried to find something about the magic forces of their enemies. Unfortunately, there was no information about magic users in the enemy's army. Nevertheless, Manfred alone was problematic to deal, but there also was Kemmler. Therefore, two women decided to find more, using several rituals, but winds of magic weren't on their side this day. Fortunately, nothing exploded. Something good had also happened during Naruto's stay in the Fort Oberstyre. Jade Mother blessed him with her visit. Naruto showed her artifact given to him by the lady. After she saw it, she assured Naruto that she will be able to cure the land of Sylvania from the vampire curse. With her help, Sylvania will once again become proper empire province. Not listening to her diaphragms, Naruto was already creating a plan for economic war with Stirland. Sylvania was once well known because of its wine. It's time for it to become known like that once more. Eastern Sylvania, Castle Drakenhof. As you can see, my lord, my plan is perfect for us. While most of our forces are holding the young usurper in the western Sylvania, we will continue with our gate plan, said Kemmler, kneeling before the vampire count in his throne room. Your agents already infiltrated noble families behind the gates. They prepare the ground for creation of new nest. Our generals will buy us time. When time will come, we will pass through the gates and I will destroy them behind us. Good, said Manfred, we will create the empire of the dead on the other side of the gates, and when we will do so, we will return, to claim everything that rightfully belonged to us. Manfred stood up from his throne. However, we will not just give up. Kemmler, prepare my warriors, I will personally lead them into battle. My lord, is it wise to attack the usurper now? Asked Kemmler. He will fight till the end, and Empire will use this action to finally deal with us. Manfred smiled. Who says that I will lead my warriors against my nephew? I will go north, to Ostermark, to spread death there. I know what Naruto wants. He desires the post of Elector Count. He wished to hold the Runfang in his arm and be among those who will choose the next emperor. Foolish dream, great but foolish. Moreover, after I will spread the curse of undeath in Ostermark. Let's just say that one of his closest neighbors will be against the idea of him becoming the Elector Count. Empire, Ostermark, fortress on the border with Sylvania. They arrived during midnight. During the most mystical hour, midnight, Manfred personally led the attack. Lines of undead soldiers moved between the siege machines preparing to take the fortress of the Ostermark. Vargholz, following the order of Manfred von Karstein, destroyed the gates, and while several companies sieged the walls, main forces, led by Vampire Count and Vargholz, crashed the defenses near the gates and swarmed the streets of the city. Manfred was like the hurricane of black steel. He helped his warriors, before leaving his army in command of the lesser vampires and lords from the other clans. He returned to Drakenhof in good mood. No matter what Naruto wanted, he will not receive it. Manfred will use everything to do so. Several months later, Western Sylvania. Manfred changed tactics. His army attacked the Empire. This forced Karl Franz's hand. He ordered all gathered forces arch to Ostermark, while Empire held the line against vampire assault. Naruto's mercenaries finally arrived to the Oberstyre. Understanding that there will be no reinforcements, Naruto made series of quick attacks on territories in western Sylvania that still belonged to Manfred. Soon Tempelhof and Schwarzhaven fell under his warriors' might, and all western Sylvania was in Naruto's hands. He contacted the commanders of the Empire, who stuck in border war with vampires. Unfortunately, it was too late. Even if Imperial Army retained their organization and managed to retreat in order, after the recent defeat on the border, vampires sieged Essen and moved deeper into the province. Since Ostermark was agricultural province, Empire was dependent on its bread. If undead army will continue its march, existence of the province will be under question. Manfred still didn't appear. This fact alone made Naruto worry. With no other alternative, he followed his normal plan. He will attack Eschen and Waldenhof, taking half of the eastern Sylvania territory for himself and cutting the vampire army in the Ostermark from possible reinforcements. Naruto did just this. Meanwhile, Empire's armies once again united under the Essen and destroyed the army of the undead. It was the time for Naruto to act once again. His forces went south and sieged Drakenhof. However, castle met them with empty halls and walls, no guards, no necromancers, not even lesser vampire or simple skeleton. Manfred had fled Sylvania. Empire, Altdorf. Karl Franz, Alberich Hauptanderson, Wolfram Hertwig and Naruto von Karstein looked over the night Altdorf from the height of the balcony in Emperor's palace. Emperor made a sign for 2 elector counts and de facto ruler of Sylvania to follow him to the table that stood inside the chambers. Finally, the 4 of them gathered to talk over the future. I will not be able to enforce law, or actually, to hold the evil inside the borders of Sylvania, said Alberich. My forces are thinned because of the recent war and raids of the Greenskins. I will not be able to control Sylvania. I can only hold the border, said Wolfram. Ostermark has suffered a lot. We need time to heal our wounds. Unfortunately, our usual provision deliveries will be cut short. I on the other hand have good news, said Naruto. I have a way to deal with the vampire curse that lies on the lands of Sylvania. Give me several years and it once again will turn into proper imperial province. Oh. And pray to tell us, how will you manage to do so? Asked Alberich. He didn't like Naruto's claim. Since the end of Vampire Wars, Sylvania was unwanted foster child of Stirland. Elector counts before Alberich tried to make something from it, but failed. Now, someone so young looking as Naruto comes out of nowhere and claims that he has a way to succeed where the others had failed. Preposterous. However, Karl Franz nodded his head. No offense, my friend, but I want to see some sort of insurance of this bold claim. But of course, my emperor. Naruto stretched his hand in direction of the massive doors. If you do not trust me, maybe you will trust a renowned specialist in lifting them. Next minute a beautiful woman in green robes entered the chambers, where 4 men stood. Dr. Grunfeld, the current matriarch of the Jade Order. She walked to 4 men and bowed before the emperor. They bowed, slightly, in return. So, Lady Grunfeld, is there a way for you to lift a curse? Asked Karl Franz. Yes, said the matriarch, with artifact, found by Lord Naruto, I will be able to cure the earth and lift the curse. Emperor scratched his chin. So be it. If you will be able to bring as much of monthly income into the budget of Empire as Stirland does, to Sylvania will be returned the status of imperial province and you will become the Elector Count of Sylvania. I give you 5 years, old friend. Of course, you must also make peace with priests of Sigmar and more. Trust me, this task will not be easy. Empire, County of Sylvania, Castle Drakenhof. 5 years later, Naruto slowly raised it to the stone ceiling of the throne room for everyone to see. Runfang, Beast Slayer, the last Runfang without an Elector Count to wield. Well, no more, Elector Count of Sylvania, Naruto von Karstein. Hell, it sounded good. During his 5-year-long quest, Naruto acquired several more companions. Some were forced to come, others followed him, because of their own volition. Unfortunately, only his first 3 companies belonged to the last, those who appeared over the 5-year period. Templar of Sigmar, Alberich von Korden, swore that he will claim the head of Manfred himself for his collection. This deranged fanatic killed several elder vampires in battle and claimed their heads for himself. He despised von Karsteins in particular and everything unholy at whole. Therefore, when he was asked by the Temple of Sigmar to keep an eye on Naruto, he eagerly went to Drakenhof, zealously trying to find a reason to burn Naruto at stake. Jade Wizard, Otto Gain, sent here by his matriarch to look over the tier of the lady, Naruto had nothing against this old man, he was professional, sent here to do his work and the man did it well. By the way, Otto had a classic appearance of the master of arcane arts, he was old, had white long beard and wore robes, of course. Let us not forget about the staff. Two more didn't attend, Archlector of Sigmar, Hector von Bismarck, and representative of the Ladies' Church, Lady Mariana. Okay, started Naruto, looking over Goiche, Morrigan, Alberich, Otto and Dinaya. Let's start with something boring. How is our economic warfare? Profit from the sales of Black Blood and Ladies' Tears increased by 5%, reported Dinaya. We have finally surpassed Stirland. Alcohol was the main product made in Stirland, however, after Ladies' Tear healed the lands of Sylvania, beside the golden mines, Naruto had discovered that the earth was really good for vineyards. Naruto named the red wine Black Blood and white, Ladies' Tears. He had sold the first bottles and was really surprised when he had found a crowd of new buyers. Among them there were even representatives of Britannia's lords, who were really picky with wine that they drank. At this moment Naruto understood that betting on the gold mines may be a bit too rash. He can raise money on the vineyards and gather gold to trade with dwarves. This decision played well for him. During the Waak, led by Gramba the Beard Cutter, Naruto helped the dwarves of Zufbar. He personally beheaded the leader of the orcs and received the right to trade with Zufbar. Of course there still were hushed whispers, but mighty voice of Gotri Hammerson declared that the holder of the Runefang came to their aid like it was foretold. Holding in his arm the sword forged by Alaric the Mad, in eyes of the runesmiths he was a warrior sent to them by their gods. Alternatively, it could have been Sigmar, who always liked to kill greenskins and became the dwarf friend, through saving the High King, Kurgan Ironbeard. All in all, Naruto's county prospered because of wine and gold mines. Naruto's army had the weapons created by dwarves and former mercenaries, who stayed with him, now became lords in their own castles, who answered directly to him. However, all riches and rise in their status was only thanks to Naruto, so former mercenary captains stood with Naruto firmly. Good, then let us speak about more pressing matters. Among them are disturbing reports from our spies and some news from the capital. Let's start from the disturbance. During the last war, when Manfred von Karstein fled the Sylvania garrison that was supposed to protect the Drakenhof disappeared. Recently we had found that Red Duke finally decided to once again exact his revenge upon Britannia. My spies reported that beside usual amount of Britannia's undead, mutants, necromancers and cursed knights, their undead, who are without a doubt were risen from Sylvania's soil, their armor is just too noticeable. So Manfred got in contact with that red jerk. How is that our problem? Asked von Corden. Not that I'm against burning another vampire, before I will burn you, but he is where? In Britannia. Castle Mazzillion, it's near the coast of the Great Ocean, answered Morrigan. My point. Because Red Duke is one of the Aporashas chosen, blood dragons may use this chance to start the war once again. Since Red Duke rules in the cursed city, Knights of the Black Grail also may follow him. With army provided by Manfred and unholy strength of the vampires, he may destroy Britannia, or at least spread his corruption so much that Britannia may never recover. And without Britannia, we lose another pillar of order in the old world. In our constant war against forces of chaos, finished Alberich. What can we do? Right now? Nothing. What's with the second report? Naruto turned to Dinaya. She had returned. Princess Maria, she had returned from her travels. Looks like she had returned and not alone. She dreamed about the army of loyal female knights and she gathered the mightiest of them. They are powerful and will not retreat neither before their male counterparts, or forces of darkness. So, Munchkin is about to give everyone some hell, smiled Naruto. She must be visiting her father's land right now. Actually, after one of the knights in the capital made rather rude comment about her companions, she went with other knight orders and her army to hunt greenskins on south. High Pass, World's Edge Mountains. Mordain tapped his tusk. Chaos Dwarf wasn't sure what to do. Of course, finding the witch was a priority. However, the closest pass was protected by their normal brethren's fortresses. That's why he was so far north. Karak Flag was far enough from pass. He will manage to use it, but he also needed to maintain control over the army. Greenskins may try to use this moment to start a rebellion against their masters, but Mordain didn't have a choice. His master was well known for his cruelty and he didn't want to become one of his new masterpieces. Looking at his former apprentice, Naruto hasn't found even a shred of uncertainty in her. She had changed, for the better. Gone was the young girl, who shyly made a first step into her grand future. Instead, he saw a woman, certain in herself and in those, whom she let close to her. Anyway, he will wait for her in the city. Grunberg, half a day later. Maria was returning to Grunberg, leading her warriors, in very good mood. She and her order managed to win the bet, leaving other knights far behind. Aside from that, they cleaned the forests between the Altdorf and Grunberg from orcs and beastmen, who had swarmed them after the last rising of the Morslide. However, it seemed that fate was on her side this day and continued to do so. At least that's what Maria thought, after she had heard very familiar voice from the cabinet of the leader of city's guard. So, the princess left to hunt the greenskins 7 days ago and still haven't returned. We need to warn the higher-ups. We need to gather the searching party. Shrieking voice of the fatso, who by some divine mistake, or through good old bribery, managed to get into the guard and moreover lead it, filled Princess' ears and made her deaf for a second, so when she heard the second voice, it took her several minutes to recognize him. I am your higher-up, fatso. My word, as Elector Count of Sylvania, is something that you should consider. If I say that she and others will manage, then she will manage. If I say that we need to go, we go, understand? But, she is Emperor's daughter, said head guard. And she is also head of entire knight order, said Naruto. By the way, Maria, stop eavesdropping near the door, be a proper noble girl and get inside. Following his words, female knight opened the doors. She stood in front of Naruto and others, those who were in the room, those who hid their smiles behind their palms, when she proclaimed that her order would clean up the forest faster and better than other knight orders, those who never believed that she would succeed, who bet on how long will it take Maria to return in tears. Instead, she had returned with heads of orcs on the pikes of her warriors. Before, others looked down on her because of her gender and vision of her order. Many thought that her toy knights will disappear as fast as they appeared, after she will lose all interest in war. Now, she forced others to respect her. Naruto looked proud and he felt like this. Actually, he was her first teacher and she was his first pupil. Bond, created between them during princess apprenticeship was tough as iron. Good to see you, Munchkin, said Vampire Count, smiling and placing his hand upon the runefang. It was another way to show his accomplishments. Back when Maria was still a child, she always bragged about her order, army and glorious battles she will take part in. Most teachers use some physical encouragement to get her brains to the right place, and destroy all this foolishness about glory and future wars. However, some demon, or maybe it was all due to Sigmar's plan, pulled Naruto's tongue and he said that she might become as she states. However, he will sooner believe that he will be chosen as Elector Count. Looks like we both got what we wanted, said Maria. I'm now head of my own knight order and you, my former teacher, became an Elector Count. My lady. My lady, doors once again burst open and beautiful, blonde-haired maiden, clad in shining armor, with war paint on her face, entered the room. Ah! Naruto, let me present you Arisia, my second-in-command and unofficially your wife. I know, said Naruto. How? Asked both young women in unison, one of the most guarded secrets, about which knew only several souls, discovered so easily. They have been betrayed. Your dear priestess swears too much. While you are away, during one of her heists she may have lowered her defenses, and one unfortunate spy had found about you. Fortunately for you, he was too overconfident and decided to uncover some of my secrets. He had paid for his insolence with his life. I knew that I can count on you, teacher, bowed young princess. Just try to be sure that you guard your secrets well, bowed Elector Count in return. Several minutes later, corridors. Arisia was the first to break uneasy silence. Who was he? Current Elector Count of Sylvania, wielder of Beast Slayer, Naruto von Karstein. He taught me all I know about his swordsmanship, or at least all I knew when we first met. Remembering how terrifying the princess was with the sword, Arisia felt the rising tide of respect to the man, who took an interest in young princess and not caring about dogmas and restrictions of society, and honed her talent with a sword into one of the greatest weapons in princess arsenal. Why is he here? Asked Amazon leader. He may have decided to visit me, or he came here to deal with some urgent business. Countless variants, Arisia, and I don't think that I wish to know. He was always mysterious and wished to take a place among other elector counts. Now, he is among them. Fate of Empire balances on his blade alongside other counts. We may have fought against greenskins and beastmen, but against him are also powerful people within the Empire, who wish to extinguish his bloodline, not caring about the fact of political destabilization. Princess sighed and continued, he may be partly vampire, but he made more good deeds for Sylvania and Empire than entire state all elector counts could do, since the end of the first vampire wars. However, Maria didn't know about one more fact, that made her old teacher even more dangerous to the religious fanatics. Recently they had found out that Naruto has an heir. Judging by rumors, he was naturally born, just like his father, Bolt. That's how Naruto named him. Only the trusted lieutenants knew that Naruto used the alluvion that belonged to the Witch of the Wilds to visit his place of birth. Shockingly, only several years passed in his old home. There he had found a young woman, who, during his time of absence, became a fierce warrior, one of the greatest in her clan. Hinata. He remembered her otherwise. Maybe it was natural to vampires, one of the few faults that he inherited from his immortal grandfather. He was somehow a part of the flow of time. Just like with Maria, he didn't notice how everyone he knew had changed. Time flew by, but he remained unchanged. Nevertheless, Hinata had what he desired, a perfect genetics, which will let him couple with her and produce a child. For countless years he was seeking someone like her in the old world, and finally found the suitable countess, and in his old home no less. However, Hinata was a clan head now, youngest in the history of the Hyuga clan, barely 18 years old, but she was already famous for forsaking old traditions and abolishing the practice of the caged bird seal. Her actions, of course, didn't make her popular among the elders of her clan, so when they sent assassins to deal with annoying young bitch, who they wanted to kill since she was a child, they would have been successful that night, was it not for the blade of vampire count. At that night, Hinata struck a deal with her savior. She will give him an heir, and in return, he will deal with her opponents. She didn't know that her savior was the one, who she fell in love, when she was still a child. She understood, only when her children were shown to her. Whiskers on their faces were good enough proof. Aside from their father, children themselves were a sore subject to her. If her dear and kind Himawari was a good child, loved by clan, then Bolt was aggressive and never took shit fro anyone. Unlike Himawari, he never had awoken his jujitsu and couldn't use the clan's martial arts. His monstrous strength and near invulnerability to gentle touch, however, made gossipers think twice before talking. Stories of him brutally executing a Hyuga guard, who called his mother a whore, was still fresh in minds of the fellow members of the clan. No one, but his mother and sister never loved him, so, when he turned 5 and his father came to him during the darkest hour of the night, he took his hand and followed him. Right now, Bolt was training under Sir Guiche, and judging by his friends' reports, Bolt was talented with the sword. When Naruto will return he will test him for magical talent. Magic, just one word brought Naruto memories of his another opponent, or rather, it was actually hard to tell how Balthasar Gelt was thinking of him, all because of his fucking golden mask. By the way, since Naruto had sent his petition of reinstating in the Amethyst Order as Wizard Lord, was vigorously blocked by Balthasar Gelt. Even if Emperor and Vigo Hisensen, current patriarch of the order, supported him, he wished for him to pay for all missing years of Naruto's membership. Jerk, clearly a typical golden wizard. Kislev, near the World Edge Mountains. Mordain the head taker knew that the hunters who lived nearby spotted his army already. It was a matter of time before the information will reach whomever took care of the law or protection of realm in Kislev. He needed to reach Sylvania, and for this he needed to. He turned to his right. When loud screams got his attention, Mordain looked over his army. Goblas were well known for their annoying tendency to scream from time to time. Unfortunately this time they had a reason for this. He saw large red mohawks and muscular dwarves, led by the king clad in a set of armor and wearing an iron crown upon his brow. Ungrim Iron Fist himself, in all his mighty glory, great, just great, who he angered so much that the king of slayers personally came here to deal with him. Head taker sighed, preparing his weapon. Blunderbussers. Let the greenskins take the fist hit. Then show our traitorous kin, who has the best firepower in the old world, screamed he to his forces. Warriors, cover them. Immortals, follow me. To the battle. However, battle didn't go as well as he planned. Many told that Ungrim Iron Fist was unstoppable in battle, that he alone was like entire army, that he claimed countless heads of various beasts as trophies for his walls. Well, all of them were right. With ferocious battle cry, Slayer King pierced the lines of greenskins, as red-hot knife pierces the butter, leaving nothing but butchered foes behind him. Mordain snarled and gave his warriors a signal, only to hear strange sound, coming somewhere from the sky. Helicopters, so many of them. Mordain, just like others, noticed them too late, because of the low clouds and Ungrim, who get all their attention. Mordain understood the plan conjured by Doi too late, only when the bombs from helicopters started to explode among his warriors. Immortals, prepare your weapons. Charge. For Hazhut. For Doi Zer. Immortals clashed with slayers, who pushed through the lines of greenskin slaves, with his trusty sword in right hand and large axe in left. Mordain searched for the one, who he personally blamed for his failure. Ungrim. Come and face me, Iron Fist. Come and meet your death, screamed he to the Slayer King. I faced many of your corrupted kin, boy, said Ungrim, raising his monstrous axe, before clashing it with weapons of Chaos Dwarf Champion. Unfortunately, you are no foe, worthy of my death. Mordain's face turned into mask of constant surprise, as Ungrim's axe cut through both his weapons and get deep into his ribcage. Grim face of the Slayer King was the last thing that Mordain Headtaker saw. Norska, border with far north, realm of chaos. His armored boots left deep traces in snow. He raised his face, hidden by the helmet, covered by the mystical symbols, with large gem above the eyelashes. Unholy warrior led the greatest horde of chaos warriors since the first ever chosen went south. He raised his flaming sword, signaling his hordes to stop. Somewhere far away struck lightning, followed by the booming sound of thunder. Kolek must be bored again. Glowing eyes looked at the horizon. Large gates appeared in the blizzard, caused by the dragon ogre. Under his helmet, Archeon smiled, just like the chaos gods told him. New realm awaited. Ever-chosen raised the slayer of kings, and countless hordes of chaos went in direction of the gates. New realm will be theirs. Souls of the fallen warriors will be payment for immortality. Soon, when new realm will be turned into lifeless husk of stone, they will become an immortal army of demons, service of their cruel gods. When they will return, none will dare to stand against them, all shall perish before the might of chaos. Empire, Altdorf, Emperor's Palace. Naruto cannot say what reminded him of her. For a moment he was relaxing on the balcony, away from the noise of the ballroom, and the next one, he is thinking about the time when he met Valkia the Bloody. He remembered that Demonis, who had challenged him to the duel, they fought and fought and fought, until she just left. However, he saw a shadow of a smile on her face before she retreated. Unknown to Naruto, Valkia was nearby. Her patron god, Korn, showed to her that the golden-haired vampire had the chance to stand against the might of Ever-Chosen. At first the bloody Valkyrie didn't believe, but finally she had decided to test the warrior herself. After the duel she was pleased by his potential, but he was still far too weak to challenge Archeon. It is rather unknown fact, but the souls of Ever-Chosen will get into the realms of those dark gods, whose messengers or champions claim the souls. In other words, will it be Korn, Slaanesh, Nurgle, Tzeentch, or the Great Undivided? Process of Ever-Chosen's last departure turns into massive brawl between the champions and demon princes responsible for this deed. Since Valkia brought the great warriors to the throne of the blood god, she was interested in being first among her rivals. Shall Archeon fail to bring the end of time, this will bring her fame among her fellow demons and favor from her patron god. Demonis jumped from the roof of the Sigmar's cathedral and opened her wings. She had lot to do and places to be. Meanwhile Naruto returned to the ballroom. Balthasar wanted to speak about something with him. Golden Mage wasn't someone who Count could ignore. Moreover, he was powerful enough to give him enough trouble. He walked near the wall. Crossing the ballroom where everyone was dancing was very rude, so Naruto decided to lose some time. Moreover, he didn't want to see Balthasar. Nevertheless, Mage waited for him in the Emperor's cabinet, and such blatant sign of how grave the situation was, couldn't be ignored. Several minutes later, Naruto entered the cabinet. Besides Balthasar, who summoned him, and the owner of the cabinet, there was also Reichsmarschall. By the look on their faces he understood that whatever they would tell, he will not like it. I will start from the good news, my friend. Naruto noticed how lot it took from him to say the last two words. Amethyst Order will take you back. You will have the position of the Wizard Lord. Unfortunately, Chaos Hordes has returned. Unfortunately, asked Naruto, you call another war with Chaos an unfortunate incident? This is no incident, this a fucking. Our report that all their warriors went in direction of the strange gates, stopped him. Balthasar. Gates? You saw something like this, during the Black Fire Pass massacre, when we passed through the pass and saw where the black orcs went, said Kurt. So, another one, muttered Naruto. Yes, said Balthasar. Moreover, we compared the magical signatures of the gates and we had found another magic point, in Sylvania. Naruto placed his hand upon his runefang. You dare tell me that I'm what? A betrayer? It's underground, continued the Golden Wizard, very deep under the earth. I do not know how it got there, but you need to secure the gates. It may be our only chance to find out what the chaos is up to. Naruto relaxed. I will see what I can do, said Naruto. He turned to leave, but in the doors he stopped and looked back at the Balthasar. By the way, where and when can I take my scythe? Sylvania, cave system under the castle Drakenhof. Naruto knew that Manfred was alive. However, before Balthasar told him about the gates, he had never thought that his treacherous uncle escaped to another realm. He had forgotten that he needed to be unpredictable. His uncle managed to outsmart him, but he will not let this failure dictate his fate. He will find the way to repay him for this humiliation. For now though, he needed to find the gates. He didn't need something as dangerous as this unknown magical artifact so close to his home, to his son. He heard screeching and squeaking, and it got louder, as he and his warriors went deeper. Naruto was worrying. He took Bolt with himself, and technically, it was his first mission. It was naturally to worry about your progeny. However, Skaven. Those treacherous rats seems to be easy to kill, but it's only if Skaven is alone that was the main problem. Skaven never walk alone, and despite their weak frames they are very cunning, has nasty habit to coat their weapons in deadliest poisons, spread dreadful diseases and eat warpstone to increase their magical abilities or gain mutations. Rat ogres were rather obvious example. Naruto remembered how overconfident in himself he was and feared that Bolt will inherit this trait from him. At least notorious thirst for battle was already showing itself. Naruto looked at the bloodthirsty grin on his son's face and gripped the hilts of his swords. Skavens came in waves. It seemed like there will be no end to the gray sea of squeaking monstrosities. Naruto let him out of his sight for a mere second. Several rat ogres blocked his view and he needed to deal with them. Beast slayers shined with furious light. In his left hand as he beheaded one of the beasts, Bloodthirster in his right cut the belly of another. Third beast roared at him, challenging him to a duel. Fireball, that came from the lines of Naruto's warriors, engulfed the beast by its flames. Vampire Count quickly understood that Morrigan was once again busy, getting their sorry asses out of trouble. Naruto looked around himself, searching for his son. He was very glad that his warriors didn't retreat even after relentless siege of the Skaven. Yes, they were much smaller than humans, but unlimited gray tide of their attack can strike despair even into the most resilient hearts. When he noticed his son, he nearly fell to despair himself. Surrounded by countless Skaven, young Bolt fought against the massive rat. This Skaven was warlord of the horde, judging by his armor and weapons. He was heavily armored and had very long tail, which he used to hold one more blade and attack with it. Bolt had to show that his kin wasn't known only for the brute strength but also for insane speed and inhuman reflexes. He would have gladly showed to that rat his magical abilities, but he had just started his practice with his father, so magic was out of option. He jumped into the air, evading the spears of other Skaven. He managed to spin in the air, using the throat cutter, his saber, to block the blade in the Skaven's tail. Bolt grabbed it with his empty hand, but the warlord awaited this. He pulled his tail back, raising his weapons higher. He smirked, showing rows of sharp fangs. It wasn't in Bolt's intentions to turn into the dinner of the warlord, or his trophy on the wall. He raised his sword and cut off the tail. Loud screech from the Skaven warlord showed Bolt that he managed to enrage the rat. Young warrior kneeled and took the short sword from the ground. Bolt looked it over. It had very strange design and was too carefully crafted and balanced to be one of the Skaven's crude weapons. Moreover, it had a sign of the craftsman and reminded Bolt about ancient artifacts left from the forgotten human empires and found by archaeologist expeditions to the New World, funded by the Empire. Gladius, that's how it is called. Bolt blocked the sickle and sword of the Skaven with his saber and trophy. Gladius Kid kicked his knee and the rat gave out a loud, screeching sound as it bended inwards. Ha! Never thought that knees can broke inwards, smiled Bolt. So many possibilities. Something in Bolt's smile told the warlord that he will be hit, maybe even kicked, or cut, or something else entirely. No matter what, it will be painful and certainly unpleasant for the warlord himself. He screeched, calling his brethren, and grey mass of Skaven swarmed Bolt. That is, until they felt the flames of Elder Vampire's wrath. Naruto charged into battle, with his swords in his hands. He left a path filled with dead Skaven. Seeing his son surrounded by bloodthirsty monsters, his rage burnt as powerful as never before. Knowing that he will not gain anything from this fight, Warlord screeched his warriors to retreat. Rats left the battlefield, with personal bodyguards leading the way and carrying their warlord. Meanwhile, Naruto stretched his hand to his son, who was bleeding from countless scratches and lying on his back. Blonde child grabbed his father's armored hand and with a push returned to his feet. I think it's time for you to craft your armor, son, said Naruto. He turned his head in direction of the tunnel, which Skavens used for retreat. Which way is the magic anomaly? The opposite one, said Morrigan, pointing in the other direction. Then let us not waste any time, said Naruto. We have spent too much time in the company of these stinking bastards. They went in direction, shown to them by Morrigan. Slowly the tunnel became wider and the armed group of humans entered the large cage. The strange glowing mushrooms of different sizes illuminated it. Some were too small to notice, others were large as trees. They gave light of different colors and it seemed that they entered some sort of fairy tale, but crunching sound under their feet quickly returned them to reality. Bones! They were everywhere. Some were intact skeletons in armor, some were crushed into the dust and the worst were piles of different bones, with marks of teeth on them. Naruto could bet that Skaven were partially to blame, at least where the marks were. All around was left different pieces of armor and weapons, swords, like the trophy one, taken by Bolt. One day there was a camp here, kitchen knives, pots, kettles and tents, everything that army needed beside the armor and weapons lied in that field of bones. "What the hell is this?" asked Naruto, looking over the remnants of the gates. "Who will build the gate arc here, underground?" "I do not know this, my lord, but this the object that we were searching for," assured him Morrigan. "Well shit," cursed Naruto, "and how will I tell this to Balthasar and the Emperor?" Somewhere else. Screeching from pain, Colt the Scourge once again remembered the humiliating defeat that he had suffered from the hands of Little Man-Thing. He screamed at his followers to ease his pain, both physical and mental. Losing to someone who was shorter than Skaven was, hit the pride of the warlord, who get used to defeating the opponents twice his height. More than his defeat he suffered from the loss of his tail. Oh, no longer shall he use it like a whip or held a third weapon with it, striking his opponents in battle, when the end of the duel is still undecided. No more. You scream that you need help. I talk that I can provide, said the voice behind him. Colt turned, as quickly as his wounds received and saw a Skaven clad in long black robes. "Who are you?" screeched the warlord. Skaven removed his hood and Colt noticed that Skaven had the white fur and instead of one of the paws he had a metal prosthetic claw. Colt had never seen the deranged Sakvan but he had recognized him instantly. "I make it Claw," said the newcomer. "I think you need to listen to what I say." Altdorf, same time. Karl Franz looked over the field before the Altdorf. When the strange gates appeared near the Altdorf and army started to get out of it, Emperor ordered immediate retreat to the city. White walls of the Altdorf stood proudly as if denying the coming army's might. Volley guns, cannons and mortars got the enemy at bay, alongside their small Wirm riders. From time to time, Emperor led his own air forces against the enemies riding atop the Deathclaw, arriving with the Pegasus Knights, whose steeds were gift from Britannian king himself. Dominating in the air, Empire firmly hold its ground, waiting for reinforcements and shooting from cannons. Invading forces were stubborn, they tried different maneuvers and tricks, sent in human warriors before them as meat shields, created siege towers, but everything was in vain. Craters from explosions and bodies ripped asunder covered hill, where the gates appeared. Nevertheless, invading forces continued their assault. Sometimes they retreated, but they also always returned wishing to take revenge for their fallen comrades. Only to come into the same hell, where their comrades perished. During one of peaceful times, reinforcements from Sylvania arrived to the Altdorf, led by the Elector Count and his heir. It was the first time the Emperor and his court had seen the heir of Sylvanian noble. Karl Franz looked at the boy, clad in blood-red armor. He reminded the Emperor a large poisonous flower that scientists found during the expeditions to the New World. Nobles of the Empire court were equally intrigued, especially those who had daughters of the same age. However, there was one question that thrilled everyone in the palace. Of course, with such facial resemblance, and even partially the same birthmarks, nobody doubted that the boy was son of the Elector Count. However, who was his mother? Why didn't they hear about her before? Elector Count of Sylvania was a man connected to many rumors, but everyone was sure that he wasn't married. Or maybe he was. Or the boy's mother had died. Or maybe his parents weren't married, thus making him a bastard. All who deduced it thus far crushed last thought. Everyone knew about Naruto's temper and feared the consequences. Karl Franz decided to not think about details. He had summoned his friend to the War Council, to discuss with him the current situation. Karl Franz stood on the balcony of the war room. City of Altdorf looked peaceful. It seemed that war, which suddenly came to the empire, was nothing but a bad dream, but nor army, nor gates had disappeared, and he needed to do something about that. From dark mists appeared the mighty figure, clad into the black armor. Emperor smiled. "Still cannot get used to it," said Karl Franz. "Your abilities, I mean, how do you do it?" "You know how," answered Naruto, stopping near the emperor. "Vampire perks." "I know about the vampire perks," said Karl Franz. "I mean the process itself." "Let me ask you this, my friend. How do you breath?" asked Naruto. "Do you know about all the processes that passes in your lungs for you to make a new breath? About contraction of the muscles? Do you know the exact size of your lungs, by the way?" "No, you just breath. It is natural." "You can just say that you don't know," said the emperor. "How often can you openly say that you do not know something?" asked him Naruto. "I'm the emperor," said his old friend. "And I'm a fucking elector count. I'm part of people, who are responsible for the choice of the next emperor. It means, everything bad that will happen during the reign of the next emperor. Everyone, who will support the new emperor will be partially responsible for his mistakes." "Never thought about it from this point of view. I'm actually assured that no one before you did. Nevertheless, let's switch the topic. Let us speak about the new breath. With your help, we will easily push the attackers from our country. In addition, I plan to send through the gates a contingent of soldiers. My daughter, she is the fourth child of mine, she deserves better. I plan to make her a leader of campaign on the other side." "Good decision," said Naruto. "In addition, I will also send a contingent of soldiers, and Bolt will also go." "Your son? He is what, 5? "This is insane, Naruto," screamed Karl Franz. "6, calmly stated Naruto, "and don't worry, he is my son, he can deal with enemy twice his size, he is also smart, and I can send some of my counselors as his caretakers. In reality, they will be part of your daughter's war council. Guiche will do nicely." "Guiche de But?" asked Karl Franz. "I heard that name. This knight was known for his tactical and strategical genius, before he became the Knight of the Grail." "Good, let us start."